Hi, good morning class. This is chapter 4.7. Should be a pretty quick lecture. If you need to pause and write down some definitions and some examples, please do so. You should be able to do that within the YouTube platform. So, first definition we have is the quadratic equation. Quadratic equation is an equation that can be written in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a, b, and c are real numbers, with a equal to 0. That is a quadratic equation. The form in the equation above is the standard form, so that will be standard form. Like I said, if you need to pause, please pause so you can write it and follow along as well. Now, following that up, we have the zero factor property. That basically says that a times b equals 0, then a equals 0, b equals 0, or they both equal 0. Okay. The reason we do this is we started out with a quadratic equation. If we could factor it, put it into two things that are multiplied, then either of those terms equals 0, then we could solve it, essentially. Or they could both equal 0. So, if you need to pause and write this down, go ahead and pause, write this down. Let's move on to an example. So our first example, example 1, to solve 6x squared plus 7x equals 3. Okay. So what I need to do here is I need to get this 3 on the left hand side of the equation with all the x's. I get 6x squared plus 7x minus 3 equals 0. Now, when I'm doing that, let's use the x method. We used the x method a good bit in class, where we did 6 times negative 3, and we did a 7 here. 6 times negative 3 is negative 18, so I need something that multiplies negative 18 as the 7. Looks like, how about a 9? So we'll do a positive 9 and a negative 2. Remember, we have to put both of those over a. A here is 6, and then we have to simplify. So I get negative 1/3, and here I get, let's see, that would be 3 over 2. So that if I factored this, it would look like it would be 2x plus 3 times 3x minus 1. Okay, and that equals 0. Alright, now I can set both pieces equal to 0. 2x plus 3 equals 0. 3x minus 1 equals 0. And I could solve both. So here I get 2x equals negative 3, which tells me that x equals negative 3 over 2. That's one answer. Here, 3x equals 1. That way, x equals 1/3. That's your other answer. So now we've gone from a quadratic equation, we factored it, and then we used the zero product property to distinguish our two solutions. Feel free to pause at any time, catch up, and write down what you need to write down. The next thing we're going to look at is the square root property. Now, what the square root property says, if k is greater than or equal to 0, then the solutions of x squared equals k are x equals plus or minus k. Okay, or plus or minus the square root of k. Apologize. So, I've got a few examples of this one. So our examples here start with x squared equals 25. X squared equals 25, and x equals plus or minus 5. Because the square root of 25 is 5. Okay. So if we look at the next one, call that one A. Next one we'll call B. What if I get x squared equals 16? Okay. So that means x equals plus or minus the square root of 16, which is the same thing as plus or minus 4. Okay? because the square root of 16 is 4. Let's look at C. C says x squared equals negative 3. Now, if you notice your square root property says k has to be greater than or equal to 0. Is k greater than or equal to 0 here? No, it's not. So this would be no solution. Right? Okay. D. What if I get x minus 4 squared equals 12? Okay. This one looks a little different, but we can still make it work. So we have a squared here, this whole thing's in parentheses. If this whole thing's not in parentheses, we're going to have a problem. But because it is, we can say, okay, that means that x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 12. Okay. That means that x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 12. Okay, follow me? Now, if I look at the square root of 12 here, I can break that square root of 12 down. So, I'm going to just write it over here, another color. Square root of 12. Okay, now, 12 can be broken down into 3 times 4. Square root of 4 is 2. So, square root of 12 is the same thing as 2 square root 3. So I'm going to write this in simplest form and say, okay, here, x equals 4 plus or minus 2 square root 3. And that's going to be my answer. Okay? That's the square root property. Pause if you need to catch up. Okay. Another definition, the solutions of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a is not equal to 0, are given by the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay. So let's look at our first example here. X squared minus 4x plus 2 equals 0. Okay. Now, if we recall what I told you last time in class, probably not best to use the blue here because it might contrast perfectly. The number in front of your x squared is your a, the number in front of your x is your b, and then your number by itself is your c. Okay, so here we have an imaginary 1 in front of our x, here we have a negative 4 in front of our x, and here we have a 2 for our c. If we have negatives, we need to include them in the number. Okay, so if I write this in the quadratic formula, negative b, so that's going to be negative 4 plus or minus the square root b squared, so that's negative 4 squared, minus 4, a here is 1, c here is 2, all over 2 times your a, which was a 1. Okay? So negative 4 here, negative 4 here is going to give us a positive 4, plus or minus the square root. Negative 4 squared is positive 16. Negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, all over 2. Now 16 minus 8 is 8. So I get 4 plus or minus the square root of 8 over 2. 8 breaks down into 4 and 2. So that what I get here is 4 plus or minus 2 square root 2 over 2. If I cancel that 2 out into both, I'll write it in a different color for our final answer here. So going this way because I'm running out of space. If I cancel 2 out of 4, I get a 2. If I cancel 2 out of 2, I get a 1. So I get 2 plus the square root of 2 is my answer. Completely simplified. Let's look at another example. I'm going to erase. If you need to pause to catch up, please pause to catch up. Alright, next example says x squared plus 3x minus 4. So x squared plus 3x minus 4 equals 0. Okay, I need to get everything's already on the left hand side, so remember my a is in front of my x, my b is in front of my x here, and then my c is here. So a is in front of x squared, b is in front of x, c is by itself. So negative b will be negative 3 plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, which is negative 4, all over 2a, which is 1. Okay, so I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 9. Negative 4 times negative 4 is positive 16, all over 2. So I get negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2. Now negative 3 plus or minus 5 all over 2. Now we can simplify this. There's no need for us to leave it as a plus or minus right here. So we can move this into two pieces. I get negative 3 plus 5 over 2, and I get negative 3 minus 5 over 2. Now if I solve both of those out, negative 3 plus 5 is 2 over 2, which is 1. So that's one solution. Negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4, which would be our other solution. And there we go. Alright, like I said, pause at any time if you need to catch up. I know I'm going quite quick here, but you have full access to the pause button. Now let's look at another one. Let's look at 2x squared equals x plus 4. Now it's important for us to get everything on the same side. We can take the 2x squared to the left, or we can bring these to the right. I always like keeping my a positive, so I'm going to go 2x squared minus x minus 4 equals 0. That's how I would do it. Now I'm looking at negative b. Negative b here is a negative 1. So plus or minus the square root b squared, so negative 1 squared, minus 4a, which is a 2, c, which is a negative 4, all over 2 times a, which is a 2. Okay, so what I get here, negative 1 times negative is a positive 1, plus or minus negative 1 squared, which is a positive 1. 4, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8. Negative 8 times negative 4 is negative 32. So it's actually positive 32. Negative and negative make it positive. So we got ourselves a positive 32 here over 4 down here. So what we get is 1 plus or minus the square root of 33 all over 4. And 33, I don't believe, can be reduced any with that square root. Alright, on to the next one. So, let's look at x squared plus 9x plus 14 equals 0. Alright, remember your a's here, b's here, c's here. So I get negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, c, which is a 14, all over 2 times a, which is a 1 here. Okay, so I get negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 81. Now negative 4 times 14, if we look at that, that is what? 56. So minus 56. I believe that's right. All over 2. Okay. We kind of solve this way to give ourselves some space in case we need it. So 81 minus 56. We take it to the side, do a little math. we get 25. So I've got negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 25 over 2. Okay? I'm going to go back here. That's negative 9 plus or minus 5 over 2, which means we have two answers here that are going to work out pretty nicely. Okay? So I'm looking at negative 9 plus 5 over 2. I'm also looking at negative 9 minus 5 over 2. Now negative 9 plus 5 should give you a negative 4 over 2. Negative 4 over 2 is the same thing as negative 2. So there's one of our answers. Negative 9 minus 5 should be negative 14 over 2, which should give us a negative 7. There's our other answer. Okay. Now, like I said, pause if you need to. Catch up. And I'm going to move on to the next one. All right. Let's look at 2x minus 7 times 5x plus 1, all right, equals 0. Now, if I get in this situation, is there any need to refactor it and then, or FOIL it and then try to put it in the quadratic equation? No, you already have your pieces for you. All you have to do is simply say 2x minus 7 equals 0, 5x plus 1 equals 0, and solve it. So here you can go 2x equals 7, x equals 7 over 2 is your answer. But you also have to check this answer. I've got 5x equals negative 1. So here I get x equals negative 1 over 5. Those are your two answers. That's simple. No need to put that one in the quadratic equation. Okay. I'll look at my next one here. I've got x minus 4 squared equals 9. Okay? No need to do x minus 4 times x minus 4. Let's just take a square root here. So I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus the square root of 9. Now the square root of 9 is 3. So I get x minus 4 equals plus or minus 3. So that means x equals 4 plus or minus 3. 4 plus 3 will be 7. 4 minus 3 would be 1. Those are my two answers. So all I did was 4 plus 3 equals 7. 4 minus 3 equals 1. And you're done. So no need to make some of these overly complicated. So pause at any time if you need to in order to catch up. The next one, x plus 3 squared equals 25. Same thing. X plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 25. Square root of 25 is 5. So I get plus or minus 5. X equals negative 3 plus or minus 5. So that gives us two answers here. Negative 3 plus 5, which gives us a 2. Negative 3 minus 5, which gives us a negative 8. So x equals 2, and x equals negative 8. And we're done. Like I said, don't make it any harder than it has to be. Got two more for you. 2x squared minus 4x equals 5. Okay. If I pull this over, I say 2x squared. Let me write that a little clearer. X looks terrible. 2x squared. Now my 2 looks terrible. Lord mercy. 2x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. Gotta get them all on the same side. Okay. Now I do have a few of you probably wondering, why can't I just go ahead and try to factor this? You can if you want to. You can say 2 times negative 5 and a negative 4. That's going to give me a negative 10. I need two things to multiply to negative 10 and add to negative 4. I got 10 and 1, 5 and 2. And that's really all I got. So I don't see a way forward that I could factor this to get a negative 10 multiplied and a positive or a negative 4 added or subtracted. So that's the reason we have the quadratic format. Now if you can factor it, that's perfectly fine. You just can't do it with this particular example. But I know that question's coming up. If you can factor it, go ahead and factor it. Use your two pieces to solve for 0. That's perfectly fine. But here, in a lot of situations, you can't. So here we get negative 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 4 squared minus 4. A here is 2, C here is negative 5, all over 2 times your A, which is a 2. Okay. So it gives me a positive 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus, now negative 4 times negative 5 is a positive 20. 20 times 2 is 40. So I get a positive 40 here, all over 4. Okay. Now 16 plus 40 is going to give you, what was that, 56. So I get 4 plus or minus the square root of 56, all over 4. What multiplies to give you 56? About, think about it. Anybody? Of course, you're not going to answer the phone. About 8 and 7, right? 8 and 7. So 4 plus or minus the square root. Now, if I'm thinking about it, 8 and 7. 8 doesn't have a square root. 7 doesn't have a square root. But 4 does have a square root. So how about 4 and 14? That'll work better because I can take the square root of 4 and pull out a 2 and then actually be able to cancel some stuff. Okay. Alright, so what I get is 4 plus or minus 2 square root 14 all over 4. I can cancel a 2 out of both of those, so I get a 2 plus or minus the square root of 14 over 2. Because I canceled 2 out here, cancel the 2 out here, change that to a 2, cancel that 2 out completely, and then change that one to a 2. Alright. So our answer here is 2 plus or minus square root of 14 over 2. That's why we couldn't factor it, because our answers weren't nice and even there. Okay. I got one more for you, and we'll call it a day. Okay. I've got x minus, or plus 2 times x minus 3 equals 1. Now, when you get one like this, you can't say x plus 2 equals 1, x minus 3 equals 1. That's not how it works. What you actually have to do in a situation like this is you have to multiply it out. You have to actually FOIL it and then pull that 1 back over on this side. It's aggravating, but that's what you have to do. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. Plus 2x minus 6 equals 1. So what I get here is x squared. That'll be minus x minus 6 equals 1. I need to pull that 1 over here and combine it. So I get x squared minus x, and that'll be minus 7 equals 0. Okay? Now you could try to look at that too and say, okay, I need something that multiplies to give me negative 7 and adds to be negative 1, but you'll be hard pressed to find it. So I'm going to go ahead and use the quadratic equation here. Okay, so we're looking at negative b, negative 1, plus or minus square root b squared, so negative 1 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 7, all over 2 times that a, which is 1 here. So I get negative 1 plus or minus, nope, it's positive 1 because that negative cancels that out. So 1 plus or minus square root of 1. Negative 4 times negative 7 is positive 28. All over 2. Now, here, I'll put it here. 1 plus or minus square root of 29. 29 does not reduce in any nice fashion. So our answer here is 1 plus or minus square root of 29 over 2. And we're done. Just remember, if it starts out like this here, you can't set each of these terms equal to 1. You actually have to bring it over and set it equal to 0. Okay? That 0 product property only works when it's equal to 0, not when it's equal to any other number. That's pretty much it for today. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Be sure to try your quiz sometime between Wednesday and Thursday. Other than that, like I said, if you have any questions at all, email me. Feel free to go back and watch as many times as you need to, pause as much as you need to, catch up. If you have any questions, let me know. Y'all have a great week.